So is this a demographic dividend or simply a nightmare ahead of us? Can India really create jobs for its large workforce? What are going to be the challenges ahead for the country? Joining me now is Manish Sabharwal, Vice Chairman, Team Lease Services, someone who's seen as one of the country's leading experts looking at the job situation. Alok Vajpayee is Joint Director, Knowledge Management and Core Grants at the Population Foundation of India. Dr. Uday Shankar Mishra is Professor, International Institute for Population Sciences. And I'm also joined by, at this moment, by Sanjeev Ahluwalia, Advisor, Observer Research Foundation. But to you, Manish Sabharwal, because the fear is that while India's population seems to now be outstripping that of China, where are the jobs, the opportunities going to be created for this large population that we are confronted with? How do you see these numbers that are staring us in the face now?
I mean, population was a curse. Obviously, a demographic dividend is not people, it is productive people. And I think we have to sort of put this in context. India's unemployment numbers have stayed between 4 and 8% since independence. But our poverty has been 35–40%. So I think the question to ask is really, do we have a jobs problem or a wages problem? I don't think we have a jobs problem. Anybody who wants a job can get a job. They just can't get the wages they want or the wages they need. So I would be careful with framing, linking population directly to jobs. I think we need to think about productivity. We need to think about wages. I mean, China had a huge advantage. I mean, in 1985, the trade deficit with the US was $6 billion. Now it's $310 billion. That happened because of China's population. And obviously China's ability to make the 5 transitions which we call modernity, right? Farm to non-farm, rural to urban, informal to formal, school to work. So I would be careful with just saying a population is a curse. I mean, I think actually China losing a population equal to France, a working age population equal to France in the next 7 years is a child of their one-child policy, while India has a more organic control of our population. So I would be careful with positioning populations as either curses or as gifts. It's what you do with your population and can you make them productive. And we've proven that 5 million people in India can export more software than Saudi Arabia did oil last year, or 15 million Indians outside India can send us $100 billion of remittances. So I would just position this more as a productivity problem than a jobs problem.
So interestingly, you're saying don't get into the binary of demographic dividend versus disaster. You're actually suggesting look at issues of productivity. How do you make this population far more productive? I'll just come back to you, Manish, in a moment. Alok Vajpayee from the Population Foundation of India, we were told that it would be April, if I just look at numbers, by which time India would have outstripped China in its population. How should we see these numbers today?
Well, according to UN experts, India will overtake China sometime in April this year. I think India's overtaking China is not important. What is important is that India has a large young population, which is our advantage in comparison to China. And if we look at the demographic, every 3rd person is a young person in the age group of 10 to 24 years in the country. And they have huge potential to contribute to the national economy and growth.
So
this potential is not enough.
So you're saying it's the young population that is the key in a way to this debate. Dr. Uday Shankar Mishra, should we be seeing therefore this population as an opportunity in a way? Or should we see it as something that we should be worried about going ahead?
Let me begin by saying this, that, count of population matters the least when we don't look at the composition. And in fact, this whole debate about India surpassing China, the voluminous size of the workforce that is staring at us, we perhaps are doing one mistake, that we are looking population in a territorial limit. In fact, what is very clear in terms of the population transition of India. Its uniqueness has been its pace rather than the quantum. The quantum transition keeps us growing till few more years. But the pace at which the population transition, the demographic transition has taken place in India is unique, and that pace gives us an advantage. This old debate, I'm not trying to engage about whether it's a disaster, it is, whether we are able to reap the dividend. But I must put it frankly, that India's population in the global workforce, India's global workforce will be 22% Indians in coming years between 2021 and 2041. So my co-panelists have rightly indicated that actually the pace has been a big advantage for us. And second thing is that India's internal demographic diversity is also offering an opportunity for us to deal with the workforce structure imbalances that you observe.
But Sanjeev Ahluwalia, the fact is that labor participation rates, look at it in Asia, both men and women in particular are among the lowest. So the worry is that yes, your population is expanding, we have a large young population, potentially productive as Manish Sabharwal put it, but the truth is labor participation rates are very low, and that should surely worry us.
Rajdeep, let me just make 3 points. One is, this term demographic dividend, it derives from the concept that if you have more young people, then they'll work and growth will go up. And generally speaking, growth is considered to be a good thing. The only problem is that we don't properly measure the quality of growth. And this is something that is going to become very important in the 3 decades ahead of us because of climate change. So unless and until the growth that happens because of the demographic dividend is positive in terms of green growth, that is nominal growth less the cost that the environment is bearing for incurring that growth, we would probably be accumulating more carbon emissions than ever before, because on top of a 1,400 million population, we would be adding another 400 million population in the next 30 years. So I think that this term itself is archaic, and we should junk it. If we should devise a new term for green demographic dividend. Do we have that? I think it's very doubtful, because as you know, we are at a very early stage of decarbonization. So yes, there is no country in the world which would want to see a declining population, because that is a terrible worry. But just because we are growing, our population is young, does not mean that we are ready for the future.
Okay. Manish Sabharwal, given what you're hearing, you started or kick-started this by saying that don't look at this as a binary between whether it's a dividend or a disaster. Don't look at actual population growth. Let's just look at how productive you're making this population. The reason I now turn to you is because there's a sense that the moment these numbers have come out, there's been a wave among our netas some are suggesting, look, we've been telling you we need a population control bill, we need to also control our population, the Chinese have done it. Do you believe that simply again is a diversion from the real issues involved here, that that's not really what this debate is about, population control or not?
I mean, the best population control comes from education and economic growth. I mean, Kerala's demographics are the same as Italy. So I think, at this stage in our life as a country at 75 years, I don't think we need to put population control at the front of the agenda. As long as we deliver education, as long as we deliver economic growth, we've seen how we've had a much more organic control of our population. But, we have to be careful with sort of talking about green jobs and declining populations. I mean, in Japan, the sale of adult diapers has crossed baby diapers, and that's an absolute disaster. I mean, poverty is very green. We have the most green jobs in the world. So I think I would prefer to frame it as productivity at 5 levels, right? At states, at sectors, at cities, at firms, and at individuals. I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP. Both states have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. If you think of cities, in Bangalore, if everybody in India lived in Bangalore, our GDP would be more than China. So we have to think of productivity, and if obviously at individual it's a skill issue, on the firm level it's a productivity issue. There's a 24 times difference in productivity between our biggest and smallest manufacturing firms. And obviously sectors I pointed out already, right? 42% of our labor force works in agriculture. It only generates 14% of GDP, while 0.8%, a rounding error, of our labor force works in software, but it generates 8% of GDP. So I would submit that, look, this train has left the station on population control. I mean, the world population used to grow at 2%, it's growing at 1%, it'll probably go at 0 in another 50 years. So we should really focus on productivity, because that's really what poverty is about, productivity, and prosperity is about productivity. So let's just focus, and there is a policy agenda at states, at cities, at sectors, at firms, and at individuals that we can pursue. And I think if we pursue that, China and India had the same per capita GDP in 1991. They're now 5 times more than us. And Korea had the same GDP as us in 1971. They're now 20 times more than us. So I would say that let's just focus on, what is controllable, which is productivity, and population control is yesterday's newspaper, or at least the train has left the station.
Interestingly, the way you put it, the train has left the station, because I had put down various disadvantages of the kind of sheer pressure that our population puts on our resources. Stress on resources, a potential north-south divide that will increase, the south much more in control of its numbers than the north, an uneducated large workforce posing challenges, overstretching of health infrastructure, and spending on education becoming a big challenge apart from job creation. Do you believe, Uday Shankar Mishra, I am exaggerating some of these issues that could arise? For example, as I said, the north-south divide, where the southern part of the country is in control of its population, not so much the Bimaru states?
Absolutely. I think you have put it in right perspective, that it is actually the management which is important. It's not the count. It's not about the singular focus on productivity and all, as my co-panelists were discussing. I would rather say that there is a need for demographic governance. And the demographic governance should have 3 triggers, which are very important at this juncture. They are migration, aging, and urbanization. Because when I say demographic governance on these 3 triggers, that necessarily tells that given our demographic diversity within the country, as you rightly told, how is South managing and how is the labor force which is getting generated in the North or the Central India can well be balanced within the country. Second thing is that about aging is a concern which actually is in a slow pace rising, which needs preparation for itself. And the final one is urbanization, which nobody is talking about. Basically, the urban space, given the current urban space and the urban cities are getting completely stressed out with the pressure of population, for which we need new urban centers. In fact, in some of my past work, I was actually dwelling on this as among Indian states, which state has the best quality of urbanization. And I refer to quality of urbanization as the urban centers being scattered all around the place. It should not be concentrated in one place. And the basic thing is that new features, mobility features are what? It is IT, it is education related. So obviously, our infrastructure governance in these two parts, in terms of employment generation, in terms of educational infrastructure, we need to look at so that this mobility is balanced all around. So obviously, the imbalance that we are seeing, or we are considering it as a threat, is perhaps not a reality. It is the question of management of the population in its distribution, so that it goes down to giving us a situation that will be giving a good demographic governance.
You know, Sanjeev Ahluwalia, as a final word, the fact is that you've got China with slowing growth rates, both population and economic. There's a sense that while, you know, China faces now really a serious crisis of an aging population, we have the benefit in a way of a young population. Does that give us some kind of an edge in a strange way over the Chinese at the moment?
Rajdeep, as I said, you know, having a young population is a bonus, but do remember that it is a time-bound. It's like a check that can expire if it is not used in time. That's very important. And I'm afraid we've had a young population for a very long time, but we haven't used that check very well. And on the issue of productivity, you know, productivity is a part of green productivity. Productivity is a simple concept, you know. You push it in some capital, some investment, how much do you get out of it, and the efficiency is defined by that. But it takes no account of the amount of destruction that is caused to your natural resources, air, water, and other natural resources like forests. So it's obviously only a very partial measurement of total productivity, not total factor productivity, but total green productivity. It's important for us to switch from productivity to measuring that metric.
One final word from you, Manish Savarwal, because a McKinsey Global Institute report, August 2020, said that India needed to generate 90 million non-farm jobs between 2023 and 2030 to absorb new workers, and additional 30 million workers to shift from farm work to non-farm sectors. Do you see enough of policy initiatives that recognize the need for this shift?
I think so. On an aggregate level, unemployment is not exploding because obviously the two labor market shock absorbers traditionally have been farm employment and self-employment. But both of it's not self-employment, it's self-exploitation. So my sense is on an aggregate level we'll probably do fine. The geographic question of do we take jobs to people or people to jobs? You know, Chinese New Year is a 4-day weekend when 200 million people buy a train ticket on that 4-day weekend. We don't have that on Chhath, Diwali, Eid or Christmas, and I think we will. You know, Kerala is already 9.5% Bihari. I mean, they sent 10% to the Middle East, so they brought 9.5% from Bihar. So Chhath, which is a uniquely Bihari festival, is very big in Kerala. So I think the jobs to people, people to jobs debate will continue. But India as a continent, you can't expect the whole of India, and nor has that happened in any other country in the world, to industrialize, create jobs or have high wages at the same time. So in some level, internal migration, as long as we keep our state borders open, will also handle the crisis quite nicely. Okay. If you call it a crisis, I think it's an opportunity.
You're saying it's an opportunity, and perhaps an opportunity which is time-bound in a strange way, so we will need to take advantage of that opportunity over a finite period of time, increase productivity, use this opportunity, even as there will be those who will be concerned over the fact that perhaps population is an issue. According to Manish Savarwal, among others, that's a train that's already left the station. Thank you all very much for joining me on the news today. Appreciate your giving us a perspective on that population question.